unfortunately, trying to get a child who's going to public school to stay on their deen and to avoid all of that stuff, it can unfortunately make them resent Islam, because it's like you're sending them to the ironsmith and you're saying, why do you smell like smoke? Why? It's like, well, what do you want me to do? You're sending me to the ironsmith. Like, how do you expect me to not be burnt? How do you expect me to not smell like smoke when I come home?
And how can a parent expect otherwise too? Expect that, their child is going to be different somehow than all the people they're surrounded with.
It seems to me like this should be the number one priority of all our communities, is establishing these schools and warning parents about what really happens, because maybe a lot of them, they just seem oblivious.
If we don't invest in our own communities, in our own schools, in our own youth and children, then who will?
We're not just about talking about problems, but inshallah, we're about finding solutions and fixing the problems. So we are trying to establish an Islamic school, Straight Path Academy. Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome all viewers. Today we have a very special person with us. Usually I would say we have a guest, but Allahumma barak, I think you're far past being a guest, mashallah. This is our brother Omar Chatila. We go back 14 years. I was doing the math today, mashallah, time flies. When I first became Muslim, this brother became one of my best friends. We've known each other for years. And today we want to talk about the importance of Islamic school, and also this specific project, Straight Path Academy, that we are currently working on establishing, inshallah. So thank you for being here with us, brother. Jazakallah khair.
Jazakallah khair for having me.
So let's get right into it. I think it'd be good, firstly, to familiarize the viewers with our backgrounds in this field of, Islamic school and Islamic education. So if you don't mind telling us a bit about your history.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. So I've been in the field of Islamic education for many years. Initially, I went into the field, it was unplanned. It wasn't the traditional route through which a lot of educators go through. But I saw the need in our communities for qualified Muslim educators, teachers and administrators. And when I saw the need, I realized that if we don't invest in our own communities, in our own schools, in our own youth and children, then who will? And it's a field that there's a great demand, because alhamdulillah, our communities are growing. More and more people are realizing the need and the importance for Islamic education, and that goes hand in hand with the tarbiyah and the upbringing that parents do at home to be able to raise righteous Muslim kids in the society in this present day. And as our school grows, then the challenge is, of course, having the qualified staff and personnel to be able to operate our schools. And so that's really how I went into the field. And alhamdulillah, since then I've been in the field for many, many years. Started off as a teacher, then moved into administration. I've been a Islamic school principal for many years, alhamdulillah. And it is probably one of the most challenging and the most fulfilling jobs that are out there. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khair. And just for those of you who might not be familiar with my background, so I embraced Islam in 2008, studied it at the Islamic University of Medina from 2010 to the beginning of 2019. And then I returned to America. And just like you had mentioned, it's like when you want to get involved in a community and you see the need for Islamic education and Islamic school, it's just something that seems to naturally pull you towards it. So when I came back, I actually worked under you. You were the principal, and I was teaching 5th and 6th grade Quran, Arabic, and Islamic studies. Alhamdulillah, I did that for a year. And then I briefly taught 3rd and 4th grade the following year. And also for the past 3 years or so, I've been a part-time imam at a small community. But being there, it's different because you're with people and children specifically who also attend the public school. So I was really able to see the difference between those who attend the Islamic school and have their entire lives versus those who would come to the masjid on Sundays, and I would spend, years with them, and I would see the changes that they would go through as they would increase in age and go to the public school and be affected by that. So it really is just, I think it should be the number one priority of our communities. I really strongly feel that way. And I think that can segue into the next topic, which is why this is so important and the need for Islamic education. So what are your thoughts, Omar?
Sure, sure. So, I mean, let's start off, with looking at the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because of course he's our role model as Muslims. And when we look at his seerah, we see the huge emphasis that he put on care and attention to children, to the youth, taking care of them, teaching them, developing them, helping them develop. Again, I know it sounds like something we say all the time, but they are the future of the ummah. They are the ones that are going to carry the deen and learn the deen, and then deliver the deen and teach the deen and spread the deen. And so, how the status of the Muslim community will be in the future heavily depends on what the current generation does to prepare the younger generation. And we see the Prophet ﷺ taking so much care, not thinking, oh, well, these are kids, they don't understand, or what's, what do they know, or wait when they're older. No, I mean, he took so much care into teaching, these uh, young kids, and developing them, developing their beliefs, their values, their character, how they viewed the world, through an Islamic perspective. And that is really how we had a generation of companions that were so great. And a lot of them, sure, some of them were older, but there's a lot of them that were young when the Prophet ﷺ came with the message of Islam, and they supported him, and they were truly instrumental in spreading the deen, spreading Islam, learning it and then teaching it afterwards. And we learn so much about the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and his sunnah from these young companions, because they were young, they learned it from him, and then they lived long enough after him ﷺ to then convey that message on to the following generations. So investing in our youth is really critical, really important, even more so at this, at our current times, at our present day, because of all the challenges that our youth face, because of all the dynamics of the world we live in. And really, it's something that there's just a huge need for. And alhamdulillah, our communities are growing, and that's even more, puts even more of a demand on Islamic education.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Jazakallah khair for that reminder. I mean, if we look at the Quran and Sunnah, then we definitely see why this should be a priority, and the importance of protecting our children and giving them a positive upbringing, proper Islamic upbringing. But one hadith always sticks in my mind because it's a beautiful, easy to understand parable of the good companion and the bad companion. And that is, the good companion is like the perfume seller, and the bad companion is like the ironsmith. And you can just imagine that. If you're around a perfume seller, you're going to smell things that are good. You yourself are going to smell good. But if you're around the ironsmith, it's dangerous. It's going to have an effect on you. It can harm you. And people are going to notice it. They're going to notice the smell. And we see this time and time again. And now, when I think of why I consider the Islamic education to be such a priority, number one, I think about my own experience, because I went to public school, and I know I know the experience firsthand that it had on, the experience and the effect that it had on me. Even after I attended public school, I went back and I substitute taught after I graduated from college. But not only that, Akhi, but even now that I had the experience of teaching in an Islamic school and teaching Sunday school to students who go to the public schools, you can really see the effect. I mean, it really, for people who are in our positions, which is somewhat unique, and this is why I think it's really important for us to convey this message to people. I mean, it really has a tremendous effect. I've seen students who go to the public school, right? And as they get older, as children get older, they start off, they're innocent, their fitra is intact, and they're very impressionable, but they reach a certain age. And from my experience, it seems to be around maybe 5th or 6th grade, where they start going through adolescence, they start growing, and they start changing. And I've seen students, when they go to a public school, especially around those ages, how quickly they can change. I mean, even I've seen students who come from another country, literally they might not even know English very well, but the stuff that they start picking up on, that I start overhearing them say, the language that they use, the questions that they ask, it's like, it's really, it's scary. It's scary how much of a negative effect that, these public schools can have on our children. And then I've also seen the opposite. When I was teaching 5th and 6th grade at the Islamic school, I saw parents who took their children out of the public school and put them into the Islamic school. And I saw how quickly they started to adapt and make, good Muslim friends. And they started really taking their deen seriously and being very intrigued and really loving their religion and learning Arabic and memorizing Quran. And it was really beautiful. So, I think that's just something I really want to emphasize, is the effect, the positive effect that Islamic school can have, as well as the negative effect that, the public schools can have.
I think a lot of people don't realize the reality of public schools. Even those who know overall that there are some negative influences, they don't truly realize what goes on in there. People look at it from the outside, okay, the facilities, the people, they drop off, or the bus picks up their kid. They don't really, they might go, a couple of times throughout the year to the school. They don't truly see what goes on day in and day out at these schools. Now, I mean, for me, there's so much to be said about that. But the one thing that I think highlights how bad of an environment it is the fact that you have non-Muslim teachers who have worked in public schools leave and apply to work in Islamic schools, and not wanting to go back. To me, this highlights that if non-Muslim teachers are running away from the public schools, then that should tell you it's not something just even that as Muslims we find as an environment that's not conducive to learning, and more importantly, raising and nurturing righteous Muslim kids. But the whole process of tarbiyah, when we look at it, the whole process of tarbiyah, of raising the youth up to ultimately, get to a certain point, to get to a certain goal or vision that we have for them, that whole process heavily depends on, as you mentioned, the company that someone keeps, right? Who's their friends, and obviously if their environment and their friends, the pool of people that they have to choose friends from, that's what they're limited to. So when a parent makes that decision, it's hard to tell a child then hang out with righteous kids only, hang out with good kids, because you've narrowed down their pool of options tremendously. And number two, the actual environment that is beyond their control, that is beyond what a parent or a student can actually control. And of course, at an Islamic school, that is heavily controlled. I mean, I always give analogies because that helps people out, with understanding. And we see that again in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ as well. It's like, if you want to harvest, a fruit, you start off with a seed, you plant that seed. Again, someone can't imagine throwing the seed in the middle of a parking lot and neglecting it, and then it grows into a fruit tree and gives them fruit. Rather, they have to plant it in the right soil. They have to take care of it, give it water, make sure they remove the weeds or any protect it from any conditions in the environment that might harm it. And then gradually, slowly, it's a slow and gradual process. It grows until it forms a small tree, and then it grows from there, and then eventually it'll give the fruit that could be harvested. So similarly, we can't throw our children in an environment that does not produce these type of results that we hope for, that we're looking for, and then expect them to somehow turn out to be the way we hope them to be. Again, people always look at the exceptions, but really you have to look at the generality of it. Now, that doesn't mean everyone who goes to a public school is going to turn out horrible, or everyone who goes to a science school is going to turn out to be righteous and great. But of course, you have to look at the environment that produces that. You have to look at the factors that influence and impact that. And that's what tarbiyah is, that gradual process. It heavily involves making sure that the environment, the factors, all the input is controlled. It's what you need it to be until you eventually get the outcome that you want. Otherwise, it's just wishful thinking. If you think, yeah, that's how I want my child to grow up, but you're not, actually, as an individual parent and as a community, we're not doing the things that we know produce these type of results and outcomes, then it's just wishful thinking.
That's a very important point, and it's really making me reflect on my the past 3 years, where I had that opportunity to teach every day at an Islamic school. I had certain students, we had certain classes. Every day I was able to follow up, give them lessons, give them assignments, give them homework. And I saw how much they excelled, how much they learned, how much they benefited versus, people who do it just on the weekend, right? Just on every Sunday, they're going to come to Sunday school. Or some people who maybe after the khutbah on Friday, they'll come and they'll ask for, some lessons or some resources. It really is like night and day because, for somebody to outside of school where they're forced to be there every day for hours, for them to then take it upon themselves to really study in their free time on the weekend or outside of their other studies that they have been assigned at public school, it's just something that I have not seen. I mean, also I have Institute Academy where jazakumAllahukhairan, Omar, you've also taught a class on there. I've taught several classes on there. The amount of students who actually sign up and go through all of the lessons, go through all of the exercises, really make use and progress through everything. It's nothing compared to having that controlled environment where every day they go to school, they're there for hours, you see them every day, you can follow up, you can give them tests. I mean, there's no comparison. I mean, and that this is one of the reasons why I felt like, if we really want to see, the next generation learn their religion, learn Arabic, memorize Quran, it has to be in like an Islamic school type of setting. It can't be just on the weekend. It can't just be, go to my YouTube channel or sign up here. It has to be like every day in like a full-time school environment.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it has to be uh, something continuous, has to be something regular, something rigorous. It has to be something, again, in a controlled environment that sets up the child to succeed, where all the factors are in their favor, not, they're going up against the odds to try and achieve something, to try and learn something. Again, another analogy I always give is that of learning how to swim. If we want to teach our kids to learn how to swim, you have to do that gradually. For example, if you want to teach someone how to swim, you don't just take them, throw them in the deep end of the pool, and expect them to somehow start swimming and floating, right? You start off, they might have floaties, you might start them off in the shallow end. You're there with them, you're next to them, and then gradually, bit by bit, as they get more comfortable, they develop their skills and they're better able to swim. Then you take off the floaties, you take off, the support. They move on to the deeper end bit by bit, and that's really what an Islamic school provides to not only nurture and develop the youth, but also prepare them to be able to be productive citizens of the world, and be righteous Muslims that are able to function in society while maintaining their own identity and values and beliefs without compromising things, while also still being able to carry their own weight within the society. And if we don't prepare them, what's going to happen is when they're thrown out without being prepared, what's going to happen is they're just going to try to conform. They're going to try to fit in. They're going to adopt their beliefs from everyone else around them. Again, in these school settings, that's where they spend most of their waking hours. When you think about it, subhanAllah, the average child spends the majority of their waking hours at school. You take out, again, by the time they get home, and by the time they do eat and do their homework and spend a little bit of time with their family or play or whatever, and then it's their bedtime. Most of the time at home is spent sleeping. You take out the weekends, and really throughout the year, or the summer and the other breaks, most throughout the year, for 10 months of the year, most of their waking time is spent at school. So it makes a huge difference who the teacher is, who the friends that they're surrounded with are, the school environment, the goal of the school, right? What is the school trying to achieve? What is the vision that the school has for the students that come there every day? It makes a huge difference. SubhanAllah. I mean, I can only imagine just the things that as an Islamic school we do day in and day out with our students, how much of a difference it has on those students. And if we take all that out and just put them in, even not even a negative environment, just put them in an environment where the focus is taken off of the deen and the focus is just on even the academics, and you see the outcome. You see what you get instead, and what you miss out on.
Yeah, Barakallahu Feek. We can make so many videos because as you're speaking, I have all these real life examples that I could share. I mean, just one thing that really immediately comes to mind is knowing how to pray. Because when you go to an Islamic school, that's one thing they're going to be doing every day. That's one thing that they're going to be learning from a very young age, maybe kindergarten. Kindergarten, they're going to be learning how to pray properly, what to say in salah, and they're going to be praying together every day. And anyone who has children and they pray 5 times a day and they pray in front of their children, you'll see that from a very young age, they can mimic, how you pray, and it's something that they'll pick up on. And then in the Islamic school, they learn exactly what to say, how, the more specifics. And you have kindergartners, first graders, second graders who know how to pray properly. Meanwhile, many of the Muslims outside of the Islamic school, I'm telling you from personal experience, they don't know how to pray. They don't know Surah Al-Fatiha, and trying to teach them during the weekend or here or there outside, and just think about how important the prayer is. How important is that? If anything they should be learning in school, one of the things they should be learning is how to pray, and they're never going to get that in the public school ever.
Even performing the actual prayer, in Islamic school, again, in that setting, by default, again, usually the Dhuhr prayer is in the school day. Aside from that, occasionally, depending on the time of the year, time for Asr might come into the school day, but usually, Dhuhr is during the school day. That's automatically built into the schedule in Islamic school. In a public school, a Muslim student isn't going to be performing their salah altogether. They're not going to be praying Dhuhr, especially at a younger age. And then as they're older, it's going to be a struggle for them to, again, fight against or go against all the factors, right, that they're up against, to be able to actually offer their salah. They're going to have to leave class, maybe. They're going to have to find a space. They're going to have to, is it going to be excused leave or whatnot? And not that some students won't do that, but again, the majority, again, they're like we said, the tide is against them. And so they're when all these factors are lined up against them, it's going to make it harder and harder for them. And sure, yeah, eventually when they're much older, when they're in college, when they're at work, they're going to have to do that anyways. But again, you have to gradually prepare them for that. You don't throw them in to that environment expecting them to be able to do that off the bat. Again, just like with the example we gave about swimming, you can't just throw them into the deep and expect them to swim. That's it's gradually you get them to that point. That's what tarbiyah is. It's a gradual process until you eventually get them to the point where they are where you want them to be, right? It's not something that is automatic. It's not something that is instantaneous. So not only that, but even beyond acts of worship, we see how, again, the Prophet ﷺ developed a certain perspective, a certain way of thinking in his companions, radiallahu anhum ajma'in. Even how they thought about things, how they saw the world around them. They saw it through an Islamic perspective. And again, in a public school, or even in any school where the focus isn't on giving the children a foundation in Islam based on the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, then these kids aren't going to see it from a Islamic perspective. I mean, to think about it, subhanAllah, even just the earthquake recently that happened, that impacted Turkey and Syria and a lot of the other countries around, subhanAllah, just helping, just to walk you through in an Islamic school, how we addressed it, how we conveyed what was going on to the students, how we developed in them how to view even something like an earthquake, so, and what happened there. First of all, you attach them, you talk about this to attach them to their fellow Muslim brothers and sisters, how as an ummah we're all connected, as the Prophet ﷺ gave the example of the believers being like one body, right? So you instill that sense of identity, that sense of belonging to something bigger than them. Okay, I belong to an ummah. It's not about me as an individual. Yeah, maybe I wasn't impacted by this, but this impacts me because I'm part of the ummah, and this impacted some of my fellow Muslim brothers and sisters. And then you instill in them the belief in the qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You instill in them the importance of dua, making dua for their fellow Muslims. that act of worship, that very honorable act of worship of making dua, you instill that in them. That way they ask Allah for not only for themselves but also for their fellow Muslims. You instill in them again the sense of, okay, well, what's my role, what's my responsibility, what's my duty towards the people who are suffering because of this earthquake. There's so many things we did, even raising funds, to help the people who were impacted by this earthquake, and also developing in them again, as you see the lessons day in and day out, as they're raising funds, for example, issues about sincerity. Okay, why are you donating, why are you giving, for what reason, for what cause, and you help walk them through all that, you help them develop all these things, versus imagine just saying, oh well, because of mother nature, mother nature, there was an earthquake and this is what happened. Yeah, sure, maybe we'll send some donations to help them out, but that's it, really. That's
Worse
all
than
it
that,
was.
okay, they can say things worse than that, just spreading kufr because I don't want to
Yeah,
get
yeah.
into it, but
I'm talking
yeah,
about best case scenario is
right, best
is
case scenario, yeah.
yeah, that best case scenario, again, because that's the best case. So worst case scenario, I mean, there's all kinds of stuff, as you said, even the hate that some people have displayed, towards, oh well, these are Muslims that are suffering, so it
Mm,
doesn't matter. The authority complex that a child develops, being exposed to
mm.
that imaging, rather than feeling honored that they're a Muslim, feeling a strong attachment to their identity as a Muslim. I mean, there's so much to it, but again, even something as simple, and that's something small, something simple, just a small example of really what goes on within an Islamic school, versus again, not having that environment and that ability to control what we teach our kids, how we teach our kids. Then it's just, it takes away uh, a lot of our ability to truly have raise our kids to be what we want them to be.
One interesting thing I wanted to share about some of my experiences is I had a student who previously went to a Christian school, went to a Catholic school. And that was because I guess his parents thought that, well, Catholic school versus a public school, I'll send him to the Catholic school. So that being the case, they were taught many things specific to religion, specific to the prophets or stories of the prophets or God or Isa alayhi salam, so on and so forth. So it became very apparent to me the more I was teaching him and the more questions that he would have and his perspective of things that I was teaching him that, he had already been taught at his Catholic school, how much of an effect it had on him. I was kind of shocked because he learned so many things, and they knew he was a Muslim there. He wasn't trying to blend in. Like, no, he knew he was a Muslim, but just
Yeah.
because he went there, he was still forced to learn these things. And it still shaped the way he viewed many of the prophets, many of the stories about life, about theology, about many different things. And I was quite shocked that it had that much of an effect on him. But public schools, secular schools, they're having just as much, if not more, of an effect. It's harder to maybe pinpoint because it might not be specifically related, or they might not articulate it. A lot of kids, they don't sit there and they can't articulate all the ways that they're being affected or everything that's happening to them at school. But I love the example that you gave about throwing them in the deep end, because when I reflect on my experience going to middle school, because I feel like that was sort of the transition of childhood, the fitra and being a kid to immediately being thrown in the deep end. That's how I felt. And I briefly addressed it in my Journey to Islam video where I talked about my sort of biography and everything. But that's really how it feels, is that you're thrown into this environment. It's crazy. You know what I mean? It's crazy. Like Islam, we have a very set structure of how to greet one another, how to behave, how to dress, about praying, about our view on life and reality and sins and good deeds. We have everything has been taken care of. But it's like, I felt so lost, and I felt afraid, and because you're literally like trying to to stay afloat. And many of these kids, that's the situation they're in. It's like you can either try to go along with what they're doing there, which is going to obviously lead to a lot of sinful un-Islamic behavior, or even the non-Muslims, like if they're going to avoid a lot of the social degradation that's happening and being spread, they're going to have to keep to themselves anyway. I remember seeing this as a substitute teacher with non-Muslims. I just looking at the class, there were certain kids that grew up in my neighborhood, and I saw how they were a bit antisocial. They kept to themselves, but it sort of helped them maintain being a good kid, because there's so many things that come along with being popular and going along with the crowd that lead them astray, and I mean, there's just so much SubhanAllah, there's so much to talk about regarding these things. But the last point I wanted to make was, unfortunately, trying to get a child who's going to public school to stay on their deen and to avoid all that stuff, it can unfortunately make them resent Islam, because it's like you're sending them to the ironsmith and you're saying, why do you smell like smoke? Why? It's like, well, what do you want me to do? You're sending me to the ironsmith. Like, how do you expect me to not be burnt? How do you expect me to not smell like smoke when I come home? So, man, there's so many things we could talk about.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that's an excellent point, because how can a parent be upset at their child for, being friends with the wrong people, when that's the pool of friends, of available options to choose from, that the parent has put that child in that situation, and the people available around them to make friends from, the vast majority of them, that's how they are. So how can a parent truly be upset or blame a child, and how can a parent expect otherwise too? Expect that their child is going to be different somehow than all the people they're surrounded with.
Well, that's what makes you wonder if they actually know the reality. And this is why I'm a bit surprised that more people don't seem to be making this a priority, in terms of, I don't know, maybe the well-known figures, the imams. It seems to me like this should be the number one priority of all our communities, is establishing these schools and warning parents about what really happens. Because maybe, a lot of them, they just seem oblivious. They didn't maybe grow up here. They maybe didn't go to public school themselves. Like you said, they see the big football field, and they see the school bus, and they see the facilities, and they think a certain thing, but they don't truly understand the reality or what they're sending their children to. But then once they experience it, unfortunately, it's like, as the saying goes, the prevention is better than the cure. You want to prevent these things from happening, because once you get an illness, it's difficult to treat it. And that's kind of how it is. Sometimes, it takes something very tragic that happens, things that I don't even want to mention, but very terrible things that happen to people's kids just because they were with the wrong crowd at the public school. And then by the time their parents wake up to it, I mean, it's so difficult to deal with at that point,
Yeah. In some cases, I mean, that child might even lose their life because they're hanging out with the wrong crowd, and there's nothing to even attempt to fix at that point. The parent just lost their child. And then there's so many stories, so many things to share. Perhaps we can share those in another.
Yeah, we could talk for hours.
There's so much. I mean, SubhanAllah. I mean, it's the field of Islamic education. I mean, there's a lot of things to talk about pertaining to the importance of it. There's a lot of things to talk about pertaining to the challenges of offering relevant and effective Islamic education to the masses of the Muslim youth growing up in today's society. There's of course, the social media, internet aspect of things, right? We talked about public school setting, but there's also the things that the kids are being exposed to online, virtually. There's talking about the challenge of funding, right? I mean, again, because these projects, these schools, these organizations take money and funding and resources and time from qualified individuals to operate and run and establish. And again, it's not because of lack of resources in our communities. I think that a lot of our Islamic schools might struggle with the funding and the finances, or we don't have more Islamic schools being established. It's not because of lack of funding. At first, upon first glance, someone might think we don't have the funds to establish these organizations. But when you dig a bit deeper, you realize, sure, we might not have unlimited funds, but we have funds to be able to, and resources within our communities to be able to establish excellent schools. The challenge is misplaced priorities, or prioritizing them, but not above, everything else. Prioritizing other goals, other objectives above the objective of having good Islamic schools, enough Islamic schools that serve our communities and actually nurture our youth and raise them to be the righteous Muslims that we want them to be in the future.
Yeah, well, Jazakallah khair, Omar. Like I said, we could talk for hours about this, but we do want to let everyone know that, we're not just about talking about problems, but inshallah, we're about finding solutions and fixing the problems. So we are trying to establish an Islamic school, Straight Path Academy. Right now, we're fundraising, and this is, like I said, this is a priority, and I think it should be a priority for all of us. So if you check the links in the description, you can, support this project and get involved. And inshallah, it's just a matter of time. I hope that we can put out a lot more content similar to this, where we continue this conversation on a more frequent basis, and that we can all come together and try to fix these issues, inshallah. Because with Allah's help, we definitely can. It's just a matter of us really prioritizing it, inshallah. And also, I wanted to post a lot more resources for teaching our kids. Like as a teacher, I've published books. I have worksheets and I have activities and things that I've seen work over the years. So there's a lot of things that we want to develop, related to this topic. So your support is very much appreciated. JazakumAllahukhairan. And Omar, I'll give you the last word, inshallah.
SubhanAllah, I mean, when we think about why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us and placed us on this earth, of course, Allah tells us that purpose in the Quran, right? He created us to worship Him, to fulfill that. And we know we're only going to be here for a certain number of years. It's a limited number of years. No one lives, no human being will live forever, right? We know that day, the day when we pass away, the best way for us to prepare for it is, as the Prophet ﷺ said, when the son of Adam passes away, their deeds come to an end except from three. And subhanAllah, you notice those three things are found in establishing Islamic schools and Islamic education. And those three things, ongoing charity. So establishing a school, again, that's an ongoing charity, because as long as the school's operational, as long as what's being taught, as people are learning, people are benefiting generation after generation, then the reward from that keeps coming in. So that's one. And beneficial knowledge is the second one. Again, if someone taught someone beneficial knowledge, then the reward continues after that, for as they continue to spread it on, teach it to others. So that's, again, an ongoing form of reward. And again, a school teaches beneficial knowledge. An Islamic school teaches beneficial knowledge. So anyone who teaches or works there, or anyone who supports the establishment or the operations of an Islamic school, then they're getting part of that reward. And the third one is a righteous child who makes dua for them. And again, Islamic school helps parents raise righteous children, because you need both the parents at home and the educators at school working hand in hand together to raise righteous children. And so again, a righteous child making dua for the parent would give them ongoing reward after their death. And so subhanAllah, all these three things, while you might find some of these things, one of these things in other things, for example, if someone starts a hospital, you might find again, that might be a sadaqah jariyah. Someone starts a masjid, again, that might be a sadaqah jariyah. If someone starts a well for people to drink, that might be a sadaqah jariyah. So those are all good things. But the one thing upon reflection, that you find all these three things that provide ongoing reward for someone after they pass away, when their deeds come to an end, but the reward keeps coming in, is schools where Islamic education is able to be conveyed and given to the youth and the future generation of Muslims.
Jazakallah khair, Omar. That's a very beneficial reminder. So thank you everyone for watching, and please check the links in the description. Inshallah, you can get a piece of the reward. And again, please look forward to future discussions about these topics and resources. Till next time, jazakumAllahukhairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.